Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're heading up to British Columbia to check out North Bay Resources' Murex Copper Project. They put out a press release November 4th with some really interesting results. And you know what I like?
What's that?
They included a bunch of historical data in this press release, so we're going to get a really good look at the whole picture.
Oh, yeah, that's great context. It's like having a treasure map with clues from different times.
So let's get to the treasure. North Bay hit some seriously impressive copper grades, like up to 9.5%.
Wow. Yeah, you don't see grades like that very often these days,
Yeah.
especially in copper. That's a really significant discovery.
So to put this in perspective, the Murex project is sitting on what's thought to be a collapsed volcanic dome. It's like a giant ancient volcano that caved in on itself. And within this structure, there are 5 different copper zones. And it looks like the D zone is the real star here.
Yeah, both the historical data and these new findings are pointing to the D zone.
And you know what else is interesting? The exploration team noticed some unique features in the fracture patterns this past summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it looks like there might be localized bulging and uplift in the D and E zones.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So like pressure building up
Yeah,
and maybe pushing those valuable minerals closer to the surface.
exactly.
And we're not talking about a small area either. This zone runs continuously for over half a mile.
To really understand the significance of all of this, we need to take a trip back in time. This project has a long history going back to the 1970s with Standard Oil and then Noranda in the 80s.
Which is now part of Glencore,
Right.
a major mining company.
So North Bay is lucky to have decades worth of data to work with.
Oh, yeah, this is a huge advantage for them. They've got a real head start in understanding this deposit. And what's really fascinating is that this data suggests the Murex project might have both high-grade vein-type copper and potentially larger, lower-grade deposits.
So it's like finding both a rare gemstone
Yeah.
and a whole mountain full of valuable ore.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy.
But there's so much data. Can we dig into some of the highlights that show the potential of this project?
Sure. Let's look at some of the historical drilling data. One thing that stands out is that they consistently hit high-grade veins, but they're within a much larger zone of lower-grade mineralization.
So they could mine for those high-grade sections, and also more broadly for the larger, lower-grade resource.
Exactly, like having multiple options.
So it wasn't just a one-off lucky strike.
No, there's definitely a pattern of high-grade copper here. For example, hole 86-7 intersected 2 separate high-grade zones. One was 65 feet long with 1.5% copper, and the other was 22 feet long with 3.3% copper.
Wow, that's impressive. It sounds like North Bay's recent discovery really builds on this historical data.
Exactly. It's like those old drill results were saying, hey, there's something special here. Keep digging.
Okay, so we've got high-grade copper, but it looks like there's also gold and silver.
You bet. The historic data shows some really impressive gold and silver values, too. Like hole 86-1 hit a 52-foot section with 0.2 ounces of gold per ton, along with silver and copper.
Okay, so we've got copper, gold, and silver. What else makes the Murex project stand out?
Well, all those surface samples are important, too.
Great.
They show us that the mineralization isn't just deep underground. It's coming right up to the surface.
So they're practically tripping over these valuable minerals.
Pretty much. And some of the surface samples are really incredible. Like sample number 1C333 from 1987, graded 3.5 ounces of gold per ton.
Now that's a surface treasure.
And there are a bunch of samples from 1988, all across the project, that show copper grades over 1%, with good gold and silver values as well.
So valuable minerals have been found at Murex for decades. And now with North Bay's recent discovery, it looks like they've hit the jackpot.
It certainly seems that way. But wait, there's more. In the fall of 2023, North Bay did some exploring in the northwest area of the property.
Oh yeah, they had some really impressive gold and zinc results there.
A sample H619241 had 1.9 ounces of gold per ton, 4.5 ounces of silver, and 6.7% zinc.
Hold on, zinc too. This project is like a geological piñata. You never know what's going to come out next. So we're talking copper, gold, silver, A and D zinc now. This is getting ridiculous. You said earlier that this historical data is like a treasure map with clues from different eras.
Right.
What's the message here? What are all these clues pointing to?
Well, it's telling us that there's a lot of potential for diverse mineralization here, which is really exciting. It's not just about one metal. It's about the potential for a multi-metal mine, which is always good from an economic standpoint.
Makes sense. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. If one metal's price drops, you've got others to fall back on. So where does North Bay go from here? They've got all this amazing data, a big new discovery, and tons of potential.
That's the million-dollar question. And it's a good problem to have. I mean, they could focus on drilling out those high-grade copper zones, prove up the resource, and maybe go for a smaller, higher-grade mine operation.
That makes sense. Go for the good stuff first. But what about everything else? The lower grade deposits, the gold and the zinc. Did they just ignore all that?
Not necessarily. They could take a more comprehensive approach, do more exploration to really define those lower grade zones and get a better understanding of the overall resource potential.
Yeah, so it's like mapping out the whole treasure chest before deciding which part to open first.
Exactly.
Because maybe those lower grade zones are so big that they're actually more valuable overall.
It's choosing between a handful of diamonds and a mountain of gold.
Right.
So it's all about finding the best strategy for maximizing the value here. And that's where all this historical data is so valuable. It helps North Bay connect the dots between their recent findings and what's been known about the project for decades.
It's like they inherited a guidebook to a treasure. They don't have to start from scratch.
Exactly. They can use all this information to come up with a more efficient exploration plan, which saves them time and money.
So it's not just about finding the treasure, it's about knowing how to uncover it.
Right.
And that's what makes exploration so fascinating.
It's like science strategy and a little bit of luck all mixed together.
So if you were North Bay, what would you do first? Where would you focus your attention?
That's a tough one. I think I'd start by drilling a few more holes in that area where they hit that 9.5% copper, just to see how big that high-grade zone really is.
Follow the trail of the biggest nuggets, right?
You got it. But I wouldn't ignore those other targets. I'd want to do more drilling in the northwest to get a better handle on the gold and zinc, and maybe some wider space drilling to test the limits of those lower-grade copper zones.
So a little bit of everything. Keep uncovering the full potential.
Exactly.
Man, I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about this project a lot more.
I think you're right. It's just too exciting to ignore.
You know, you said earlier that the historical data is like having a treasure map, but it's really more like they have multiple treasure maps, each one pointing to a different kind of treasure.
That's a great analogy.
It's up to North Bay to decide which map to follow first.
You know what? Let's switch gears for a minute and talk about what this discovery could mean for the copper market as a whole.
Okay, yeah, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. So we've established that the Murex project is looking pretty good for North Bay resources. What could a discovery like this mean for the copper market as a whole?
Well, copper is a pretty important metal. It's essential for a lot of things these days. Electronics, construction, renewable energy technologies.
Right. I've heard it called the metal of electrification.
Exactly. And as we move toward a greener future, that demand for copper is only going to increase.
So new discoveries like this one are really important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're vital for ensuring a stable supply of this critical metal.
So North Bay's discovery is a win for the company, but also for a more sustainable future.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the quantity of copper either. It's about the quality. Remember those high grades we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, those high grade deposits are more efficient to mine, and they have less of an environmental impact.
Ah, so less waste and disruption.
Exactly.
So this discovery could actually help create a more sustainable copper mining industry.
That's the idea. But of course, it all comes down to how North Bay develops the project.
It's not just about getting the metals out of the ground. It's about doing it in a way that works for everyone.
I completely agree. It's so important to think about responsible resource development, finding ways to balance economic growth with taking care of the environment.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job covering this project today. We've gone from an exciting new discovery all the way to the potential impacts on the future of the copper market. Yeah, it's been quite a deep dive. From collapsed volcanoes to polymetallic mineralization, we've really gotten to know this project.
And the best part is that the story's not over yet. Who knows what else they'll find at the Murex project?
It really highlights how much there still is to discover, even in places that have already been explored.
So for all our listeners out there who are now just as interested in the Murex project as we are, make sure you keep an eye on North Bay resources. You can find them online or on social media.
And if you want to learn more about mineral exploration, there are tons of resources available online.
Absolutely. Happy digging, everyone.